Welcome, Dr. Patty Brennan, to the Penthouse interviews at the Charleston Conference 2019. We're thrilled to have you here. And later today, you'll be doing a plenary address for our attendees, but grateful that you could take the time to sit for a conversation about you and your background and what's going on at the National Library of Medicine. So welcome.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I got to hear a couple of the morning sessions today, and I see a tremendous alignment between the way we're thinking about advances in scholarly communication and the role of a federal library. So this is a great day for me. I'm really pleased.
Okay, terrific. Terrific. So just to start, prior to being named director at the NLM, which a position in which you've been for 3 years, you were a pioneer in developing health information systems for home care patients, as well as directing Project Health Design and stimulating the next generation of personal health records. With that background, what is it about being director at NLM that was compelling for you?
I appreciate you asking this question. My entire academic career as a nurse and as a nurse engineer and as a nurse informaticist has all been focused on how do we get information into the hands of people at the point that they need it, not at the point that we're able to deliver it to them. So if you look across the work that my research teams have done since the late 80s, we've been dropping new kinds of technologies into people's homes to see how do they work, will they fit, what do people do with them, where do they put them? And we learned over time that information exploration when someone is ill is an incredibly personal experience. So we have to be mindful of the context, but we also have to be mindful of the content. At the same time, often the content that professionals provide to patients brings a professional view. What is the matter with you? Where did you get this? Why do you have this? What's going to happen? Very often what the patient wants to know is, how do I make breakfast tomorrow? What's going to happen to my children? How do I get dressed when I have this wound? So they're looking for the intersection of information. The director of the National Library of Medicine, Dr. Lindbergh, who was in position for my entire professional career until this point in time, was a leader in electronic communication, in democratizing information. He opened up PubMed to the world for free. But he also, what's less well known about him is he believed if we're going to change health and healthcare, we have to go directly to the patient. So he engendered in the National Library of Medicine a commitment to consumer information and making sure we had initiatives and resources like Medline Plus, which is a direct-to-consumer information. As my career progressed, I moved from understanding innovative technologies to personal health technologies such as mobile phones to using virtual reality to understand the context of the self-care in the home. And then I was ready to retire. And then Dr. Lindbergh decided to retire also, and the position came open, and I still was ready to retire. But as I was thinking about it and talking to some of the different directors and also some of my colleagues, the opportunity to shape health information and the way we deliver it that the National Library of Medicine has is profound. So by assuming this position, I could actually continue my vision that information in the hands of people is powerful. Now, I have a nice intersection of my own research and the National Library of Medicine. I do study how we can use advanced visualization to help people know how to better take care of themselves. Think, for example, being able to rehearse a dressing change in a visual virtualization of your own bedroom. So you know where things should lay, you know how much space you have. My goal is to eventually get information into the hands of people without making them read it, because they don't read it. So we need to find ways to engage people with that. So the opportunity at the National Library of Medicine is to direct globally the way health information is emerging from cells to societies, from genes to the whole organism, and to bring that information together for professionals, absolutely, researchers, scientists, but also for lay people.
Well, and particularly democratizing that information. I like the use of that term. It certainly is resonant and makes sense for a federal agency to have that at the core of the mission. So can you talk a little bit about, you've really tried to position the NLM as a hub of data science at NIH. What does that really mean for the library? Well,
it's a much better term than the first term they used, which was epicenter. And that evokes this sense of earthquakes for me. So I didn't like that idea at all. The National Library of Medicine has actually been the nexus of important health data for over 40 years. In the late 1970s, early 1980s, the library began to digitize its collection and make it available through, at the time, Medlars, through our Medline searching. But in the early 1980s, Dr. Lindbergh and some of our leadership in Congress, including Claude Pepper, brought forward this idea that with the genomic revolution, we needed to bring the principles of library secure storage, access, persistent accessibility to data science, to at the time what was considered genomic data. So we began, the library began to become the repository of genomic data, helped to shape an international collaboration so that discoveries by the genomes about the genomes weren't kept behind the locked doors of a business, but were actually available for other investigators to use, well positioning the library. Now, we opened the National Center for Biotechnology Information in 1988. And our first use of genomic databases actually happened around 1985. Since that time, we've developed tools such as BLAST, basically a tool for basic sequence alignment. You've sequenced a new segment of a genome, you want to know, has anybody else seen it? You can use our tools to figure that out. But we've gone well beyond that to make sure that the library and its principles, open access, persistent storage, accessibility, guide the way we manage data in the present and the future for healthcare. Now there's 3 different things that are happening right now that are important and critical why it's in the library. First and foremost, we want to promote access to data, yet our data sources are growing faster. Think of all the different image data that happens right now, or Fitbit data, or information about the way that your blood is circulating in your body or your electrical waves are moving in your brain. New kinds of data are coming online that need to be managed quite the same way publications need to be managed. Not certainly like a publication, but in the idea of we need to make it accessible, findable, tractable. Secondly, we know the data sets are getting bigger, so it's not always possible to locate a data set of interest for a researcher or for a citizen scientist and download that, because some of our data sets are 2 and 3, 4 petabytes big. It takes days to download that. So we're working more with the NIH and commercial cloud providers to make our publicly accessible, secure data available for use broadly by the public, by industry, by scientists, by scholars, by students. We've moved 15 petabytes of our sequence read archive into the Amazon Web Services and the Google Cloud, now making it available for investigation and interrogation by anyone in the world without having to download it. So we've created a new platform for discovery. So first, we pay attention to making the data available and accessible. Second, we move to modern technologies to make sure people can use that. Third, and most important to me, is that the library brings principles of curation, cataloging, metadata, understanding how to describe the data, that brings an organization to these massive data flows. So by our scholarly work, by the application of our tools, we are making data more accessible. We will never become the massive data store of the world. We can't do it, we don't have enough computers, and more importantly, data are highly distributed. So our library function is moving from being the custodian of data to the connector of data sets and helping to facilitate discovery of them.
Well, and that is fascinating and certainly very, very relevant with where we're moving, but you didn't say it explicitly, I'll say it. What this really leads to is hopefully faster discovery, more informed discovery, faster innovation.
Right.
Not just in this country, but around the
We
world.
absolutely believe the reason for the library to exist is as a platform for discovery. And for us, we know that right now the National Library of Medicine ingests 1 million new literature citations a year. We have to make them accessible in the literature, but in addition to all that literature that's coming in, we have all these data sets and all these new approaches to collecting and generating new data coming at us faster than you could imagine. So traditional means of locating, connecting, and displaying data and library resources of all types won't help in accelerating the pace of discovery, and in fact could interfere with it. A paper that might have been critically important in 1978 and remains important today might get lost if we don't find a new way to present our citations. So we are working in front of the screen for the patrons and behind the screen for computer-to-computer uses to make sure that we reduce the barriers of access and interpretation so we can support science. There's not been a scientific discovery in the world in the last 30 years that hasn't been touched by our resources, and I'm incredibly proud of that.
That's really pretty amazing. And again, contribution for scientists here in the United States, but also worldwide, increasingly worldwide.
Absolutely, and we recognize that we are a federal government agency in the United States. Our primary audience is the United States scientists and citizens. However, germs don't know country boundaries, and healthcare discoveries are not constrained by economic models. So we need to have full and free open access of information. So for example, clinicaltrials.gov, which is our repository of active and completed clinical studies, accepts clinical studies from all around the world, because it's as important for our scientists to know that a line of inquiry has already started in another part of the world as it is for them to be able to document their own line of inquiry.
Well, certainly an amazing investment.
Yes.
That the government makes, and many people are fortunate. They're more healthy because of it. These new initiatives, how have they really impacted library services? Can you talk a little bit about how this has impacted staff and how you look at the personnel that are so critical to achieving these goals?
As you know, I'm not a librarian and wasn't trained as a librarian. So when I came to the National Library of Medicine, I had to understand first and foremost that technical services didn't mean the computer shop. It meant the acquisition and management of it. So the impact in part has been, and frankly, an inadvertent byproduct, good byproduct of my naivete. I've had to ask people a lot of questions. What do you do? And how does that fit into our future? We have 1,700 women and men that work at the National Library of Medicine. In addition to that, we have 7,200 points of presence around the country in the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. These are public libraries, academic health science libraries, hospital libraries, of which there still are some, who work together with us to bring health information into the hands of scientists and people and clinicians, as well as to provide them the tools to interrogate data, to report their studies, to find good publication outlets. The job of a librarian has never been more important because of the librarian's basic, first of all, belief and the value of inquiry and the patron driving the question, and the library's response is to find a way to create that answer. But as the patrons are coming more and more with questions about data, we need to upskill our library science workforce for data science. So what we've done in the National Library of Medicine, in partnership with a private consulting firm, we did a complete assessment of all of our staff on their knowledge of data science. Everybody took 2 tests. One was about basic data management, the other was about analytics, and we got scored, but they didn't report their scores.
I'm sure you were very popular during that time.
I reported mine quickly, so people understood that I did get a 2 out of 20 in one of the tests and a 4 out of 20 in the other. This was a pathway to help people understand what's worth learning for your job. And so we actually moved it from the standpoint of saying, we want to know what your skill is, to saying, what is the capacity of the library? What is our assets in data management? And we know that everyone, from the clerks who process our requests for new computer servers to our data scientists in the NCBI, of which we have several hundred, have the tools that they need in hand. So we had personalized testing. We provided a catalog of over 1,000 courses that individuals could pick from. We gave people work time for training. We ran an intensive program this summer for about 120 hours of in-class and at-home work voluntarily, and we had 30 slots and we had 270 applicants for it. So there's a hunger out there to do this. Certainly there are people that say, well, this, how's this going to affect my job? Or the library is benefited by a long and loyal workforce, which means we have people who've been there for 30 or 40 years. Data science, well, that's something else came up in the 70s and that went away, so this might go away too. So part of my work, and we do this largely through our supervisory teams, is to find the right place for individuals. Some people's jobs will be unchanged by this for a few years, but their thinking about their jobs will be different. Some people will move to new jobs. We may create new jobs, so we're preparing a workforce for that. Through our National Network of Libraries of Medicine, we offer many different training courses for librarians, for clinicians, and for patients about how to use data in both clinical and investigational purposes, but also in terms of understanding how science is changing, understanding the relationship between the epigenome and the proteins that get expressed. So we need to tailor those courses. Last year we offered 3,200 different offerings, 1-hour seminars, 8-week courses, pamphlets in a library, and we reached over 65,000 people through the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. So we're using our human workforce to get out, to get the content into people so they can create the jobs of the future that they will have.
That's fascinating, and the NLM has always served for, I myself have taken a PubMed class, so
yes,
just a tremendous resource in terms of continuing to develop the professional skills of folks in the profession. So to wrap it up this morning, can you give us a little sneak preview of your remarks coming this afternoon?
Sure. Yes, thank you very much for that. As I mentioned to you earlier, 1 million citations are coming at us every year, which means in the 15 minutes that we've been talking, we've already had 60 new citations come into the library. We have to find ways not just to record them, but to make them accessible to individuals. So we are within the next 90 days launching a whole rebuilt PubMed, so that now we will be presenting. You'll have an option to get the results from PubMed presented to you either in our traditional approach, which is reverse chronological order, what's the most recent, newest thing on the block, or in something we call relevance-based ranking, which takes advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually give you a set of articles that may be more relevant, even if they're a little bit older. Why do we do this? Well, for one, we have to process our results faster. So we have an initiative called Automated First, where we want to do first pass of automated indexing on all of our new bibliographic resources. But secondly, we know that about 98% of the searches that are done on PubMed yield more than one page, and about 50% yield more than 30 pages. And if your research article is on page 33, no one will get to it. Mm-hmm. In fact, we know that about 80% of the people never go past the first page. Mm-hmm. So we need to get to that front page, the most relevant resource. So I'm going to be talking about the new PubMed and relevance-based ranking. I'm also going to be talking about something that I hope will launch a better and a more extensive dialogue with the publications community, and that is we are needing to understand how to better connect with preprints, and preprints as a mode of scientific communication. So the National Library of Medicine is beginning an experiment to allow preprints from selected servers. I'll talk about those servers in a minute, but preprints from selected servers to be able to be deposited in PubMed Central and have a bibliographic citation in PubMed. Now, there'll be large banners that say this is a preprint, not peer-reviewed, because we don't want to wreck our brand of peer review. But what we know is that preprints are moving into the biological and biomedical research programs quickly, and we have to find a way to connect to them. So our plan is as follows. We will partner with particular preprint services, and bioarchives is an example, mm-hmm. Springer Nature is another example, who are able to provide us their citation material in XML format. We'll ingest the citation material and deposit the full preprint in our PubMed Central article, and then make it discoverable back on the preprint service. So we hope that this will be seen as a partnership. We also are working closely with publishers and the preprint services to make sure we manage version control and connect from the final archival article back to the preprints that were originally deposited about that article. So it's a really exciting time for scientific communication.
Well, I'm going to say these are big announcements here at the Charleston Conference, so definitely not only having you here to talk about the biomedical library of the future, biomedical communications in the future, but two big announcements. Yeah. So hopefully this interview is not going to air until after your talk this afternoon.
I don't want my thunder to stick.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much again for agreeing to join us this morning.
I really appreciate it.
And we're looking forward to your remarks this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Patty Brennan, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.